Welcome to part 2 of the Beginner's Guide to Claude Code. In this section, I'm going to start walking you through how to actually use Claude Code to do things. And I'll show you in the context of building a small web app, something that we can have Claude Code write for us. Basically, kind of similar if you've used Lovable or Bolt or any of these like vibe coding tools. It's going to be really similar, and we'll use Claude Code to do it. But instead of building on like the Lovable app in the cloud, it'll be built right here on my computer. And then, yeah, so in that process, we'll show you a few of the intricacies and kind of cool things that you can do in Claude Code that make it really special. So to start off, I'm just going to type a prompt. So I'll say something like, I want to make a simple to-do app. All right, start here. And so it's going to think. And I have thinking mode turned on. So you can see a couple of things that are going on. And I'll walk through each. In response to my question, because it was fairly open-ended, it's going to start off with a Q&A, right? Basically, Claude is smart enough that when it encounters a point where it thinks it's better off asking me, the user, a question before proceeding with something, it'll prompt me with a list kind of like this. So it's asking me what type of to-do app, and it gives me a few options. I can select one. So what I'll probably end up doing is selecting the React web app. But you'll see that in the fifth slot here, I can type something. So I can actually just give feedback. And let's say I don't have any background in each of these. And so let's say I want some clarification. This is how I can actually ask. Like maybe I don't understand what it's asking me to do here. So I'll say, can you help verify what these are? Right. So it's an interactive environment. So it's kind of like you're chatting with Claude or chatting with really, any sort of AI, but it's in the context now of actually making this to-do app. And you'll see that I can type question mark for shortcuts. So we'll come back to this in a sec. But this little prompt at the bottom is letting me type question mark for shortcuts. And there's all sorts of shortcuts here. So let me just walk through these quickly for you. Bash mode. Bash is basically like typing. It'll let you like type command line commands that will do other things. So like in the last video talked about CD and ls, CD for changing directories and ls for listing the contents of a directory. This is more advanced stuff. You don't have to mess with this at all. Slash commands, I'll get into this a little bit more, but you'll see that there's a lot of like these additional sorts of like commands that have descriptions here that you can activate by typing slash and then selecting any of them. I'll come back to that in a second because there's a little bit more to say there, but that's a big kind of way of interacting with Claude is slash things. @ for file paths. So I can @mention, just like you're @mentioning somebody on like Twitter or whatever, I can say @mention and then start to type a file name or a directory or something, and you'll see how it's going to actually autofill some of these things. So I can reference files and folders inside my computer and like have it use that as context. So I might say what's in, and I have a file called hello.js, so I can tab to complete that and then hit enter, and it'll actually reference hello.js in the prompt. So you see how I referenced hello.js and then it read my hello.js here. So there you go. So it created a to-do list. And this is something you'll see a lot when working with Claude Code, is that when you've given it a more complex task, so in my case, hey, build a React app, it will break down that task into multiple to-dos. And then it'll execute those to-dos one by one by one. As that's happening, it will often ask you for permission to do things. Now, this is a really important piece of Claude Code because Claude Code is Claude acting on your computer. So it has access to your files. There's a potential, if this goes wrong, to say, download a virus from the internet, right? Or expose information, or basically just take some sort of, maybe delete a file you don't want to delete. Now, these are obviously all rare cases, but there are these protections that Claude Code puts in place. So here it's, again, asking me to install something, and I'm just going to hit yes. It will ask you for permission before running any command, unless you've whitelisted it, basically, as like an auto allow. And it will also ask you before going on the internet and reading a file or downloading a file. So those are good to keep in mind. And you can see here it's working. So something I've avoided doing so far, but it's good to show you, is that you can switch between modes by typing Shift and Tab. And you'll see that there's 3 different modes. This default mode here is called Ask mode. And this is where Claude is going to ask you for permission before making any changes, overwriting a file, or doing anything like that. Accept edits mode is, as the name suggests, it's auto accepting any edits that Claude wants to make to a file. So for example, in this case, if it wanted to remove this line and add this line, it will just let it do that by itself without having to like allow it to make those changes every single time. And this is really helpful once you basically align with Claude on what you want to have happen. In my case, it's just simple operations, create this new app, set it up basic, as sort of a basic thing. And it doesn't need my permission to do that. All right, so it gave me a summary of what it did. And you'll see that all of this exists in to-do app / basically all these directories here. And so yeah, it's asking me, hey, do you want to run the dev server? So let's go ahead and do that. And I can type tab to accept the suggested response. And Claude Code can run what are called background processes, which basically mean that it can, I'm going to accept this. It can do things in the background. So in this case, it's going to be running a local server so that I can actually access this app that it made on my computer. And so in this case, it hit a little error. And this will happen sometimes. Claude is very good at responding to its errors and fixing whatever's going wrong. So it's going to just motor along and tell me once it's ready. All right, so now I can go to localhost 5173. I'm just going to control click, or I can just copy paste this into my browser over here, pull that in. And here we go, to-do list. So I'll just make video. Add, there you go. See, now I get a little to-do list app. So this was just made by Claude Code here in like 3 minutes. And something to note is it might feel weird to say, well, I can't actually see any of the code. This exists, I'm telling you this exists on your computer, but where on your computer is it? So at this point, I want to call out that a lot of people will use Claude Code alongside an IDE, which stands for Interactive Development Environment. An IDE is basically a place where you can visualize the code, see it, and kind of work with it. So Cursor is a popular one that's more modern, has a bunch of AI features built in. It's very popular now. Visual Studio Code is another one that's been around forever. It's very popular. Both of these have a free version. Visual Studio Code is only free. Cursor has some paid, more AI-enabled features, but the basic version is just free. And you can pick and download either one. But I'm going to show you. So once you install one of them, you can open up. Actually, whatever. It's going to open up the new thing. It's fine. You can open it up on your computer by, again, typing CD and then tutorial project, switch there. In my case, I used Cursor, so I can just type Cursor and then period, and it will open up in this folder. And I like to use Cursor in this way alongside Claude Code. So if I want to get a more visual sense of what's actually being built in my machine and what this app looks like, I can just do it here. So it'll just take a second to open. It's a little slow. And then once it opens, ta-da, I can see it here. So I've got these folders here. So that hello.js one that I've referenced before, that lives here. I have a Claude.md, which I'm going to get into in a little bit, explain what this is. And then I have my very, very basic to-do app, which exists here. And so this to-do app has a bunch of folders, and you don't actually have to know how this works, because I could just ask Claude Code. Let's say, awesome. Can you explain how this app works? So if you're using Claude Code and you're technical, of course you might want to go into the code and actually kind of view all the different pieces. But if you're not, that's totally cool. Claude, as a very intelligent LLM assistant, can explain to you how all of this works. Scrolling up, it's explaining to me, here's how it works. And it's going to get a little bit more technical, but it'll say, here's the data. What happens when different things happen, different buttons are clicked and so on, adding a task and all of that. To me, this is a little too technical still, right? Let's pretend I don't know any code. I don't want to actually interact with the code. I want Claude to respond to me in a different way. And in this project, I don't want it to get too technical. So that's when I'm going to come to this Claude.md file, which I've been avoiding talking about for a little bit, but it's important to reference now. This is Claude Code's memory, and it's specifically Claude Code's memory in this project. So this is just a big prompt that lives in this file, that whenever Claude Code starts, it will read the Claude.md file, and all of that will be context for the conversation. So I might actually add a note I'm not a coder. Please explain things to me in a non-technical. Right. And so this from now on is going to be applied whenever I work with Claude. So I'm going to close Claude and then reopen it. I type the up arrow there and it puts in the last command I just wrote. So I'm going to ask it to explain how, and then I'm going to @mention to do app here. So works. That's funny. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, it seems to have. Oh, you know what? I think the background process got messed up. That's okay. So it's going to explore the to-do app and help me explain how, or help me understand how it works. And so what you should see here is that the response I get now is going to be a little bit more non-technical because that's the instruction that I've given it here. So here we go. And see, so here's the big thing. This explanation now is much less technical than before. And that has entirely to do with this memory that I put in the Claude.md file. The last thing I'm going to do is, this is a best practice for any project you work in, is actually to have Claude.md filled out so that anytime Claude is working within your app or working within your project, regardless of if it's an app or not, it will understand the basics and not have to like relearn everything from scratch. Because this is a big piece of working with AI, is that it can learn, it has memories, and you shouldn't have to explain all the basics every single time you open up Claude. So what I'm going to say is, I'm actually going to run this command. It's a slash command. And what I recommend is just looking through all of them. There's a ton. So yeah, the one that I want to use though is called init. And so this is going to initialize a new Claude.md file. And it's basically a pre-built prompt that's going to get Claude to run through everything, like explore this entire app and synthesize it into a new Claude.md so that it can kind of seed its memory with all the important information about what's in there. If you're opening up Claude Code for the first time into a project that already has content, this is actually one of the first things that you'll want to do, is run /init, and it's going to write out this file here for you with a lot of depth. So it edited my Claude.md with all the kind of technical basics so that it doesn't have to relearn what's the tech stack, what's this app all about, how's it architected. That information is really helpful for Claude to know ahead of time so that it doesn't have to run explore and kind of go through the whole code base and just do things a lot faster. There's one last thing that I want to walk through before I leave this here, which are, I showed you the different modes, right? So I talked about accept edits mode and I talked about normal mode, but the one that I haven't gotten into so far is plan mode. And this is arguably the most powerful. Plan mode is really great for going in depth into exploring and kind of doing a technical spec of a more complex feature before letting Claude just start writing code or start doing anything. The value of this is that LLMs still kind of get confused and they perform better if you make them think ahead of time about how to implement something and then later ask them to execute on that plan. So this is just a way of prompting the AI so that it will perform better in a more predictable way. And so I want to add a feature. I'll just say plan a new feature, a Kanban style interface for to-dos. To be able to click and drag, drop between stages. So like a Kanban, you know, is sort of like the left to right, different stages of a project. So it makes sense in a to-do app. And it's like a little complex, right? So there's a few different stages here. I want to be able to click and drag and drop between stages. I also want to customize the stages of my Kanban board. So when I type in this, it's not, Claude is not going to write any code. It's going to spend time thinking and planning and exploring, and then it's going to create a plan for me to approve before it goes ahead and writes any code. So I'm just going to let it do its thing. It'll read through a bunch of files, run that explore agent. So I'll just let this one run for a little bit. Plan is also useful if you're doing something that actually doesn't involve writing code at all. So I've talked a little bit about how Claude Code can do non-technical things. So I love to use it for like project management and managing my to-do list. I found the plan mode to actually be very helpful in like helping me think about systems for like organizing myself and little automations and things there. Like, hey, how do I make sure that file names are always good? Or how do I make sure that data is always, or like the notes are always kept up to date? So plan mode isn't just for coding, though I think it's probably best suited for that. And so now plan mode is often going to ask you questions like this so that it can really clarify and focus. So I'm just going to respond to these. So what default stages would you like to do in progress and done? That makes sense. What customization do I need? Add, rename, and delete. Sure, let's do that. Persistence. So should we save it so that it persists after refresh? Yeah, let's just do that and then submit. Okay, so it'll take that and incorporate that into its plan. Okay, I think it's just about done. Let's see. Okay, so it's got the plan. Now it's going to finally write it, and then we'll take a look. Okay, so let me scroll up. So here's the plan. It's going to explain to me what I'm going to get, each of the steps. Now, normally, of course, you're going to want to spend time, think about this, review it, and so on. I'm just going to skip through it pretty fast. Once the plan is presented to you, you have a few options. You can say basically yes, go ahead, and then auto accept the edits. You can manually approve the edits, or you can give it feedback and have it rewrite the plan with revisions and edits and so on. I'm going to have it auto accept the edits, and I like this workflow with auto accepting here because when Claude takes the time to write this plan, generally speaking, it'll spend time to understand all the technical issues and make sure that the implementation approach is correct. Now, you will probably have feedback the first plan, and you can iterate through a few cycles using this, telling Claude what to change. But once you're happy with it, I recommend typing yes and auto accepting. Then you'll be able to let Claude work through all of the different changes in a very fast way. Once it's finished, you can give it feedback, and it'll be able to change what it's doing, make any sort of edits. And so I'm just going to let it go ahead and work on this. And yeah, so working with Claude Code tends to be in this workflow that I like to call scope, plan, and execute, where step one scope is you might want to have a question and answer session with Claude, just like we did early on, saying, hey, what kind of framework do we want? Do we want JavaScript? Do we want it to be a React app? Should it be Python? Like that kind of back and forth to help refine the idea is really important. Maybe you want to have Claude do some web research to understand competitors, what are other products doing. Then once you have a pretty good idea of what the product is, then switch to plan mode and have Claude do a more in-depth technical plan. So the plan mode is great for technical stuff. Not so great, I think, for more of like the business side of like planning. That's a little bit earlier in the process. So you're going to go into ask mode, back and forth, have the dialogue, switch to plan mode, do the technical plan, and then switch to execute mode. Put accept edits on and just let it run, let it rip. And that often is part of an iterative process where you go through those three stages over and over and over. But that's by far the best way to get good results out of Claude Code.